years ago. And another part of the conversation is that like to be Black in Latin America has real effects, just like Blackness here, right? We see that like the cops are more likely to pull you over, you know, many forms of violence could happen to you for being Black in the US. That is very true. Same thing happens in across Latin America. So like using Honduras, for example, as a context, like 2 months ago, several leaders in Garifuna village were abducted, and they are no longer, like, we don't know where they are. We don't know the status of where they are, how they're doing. And that's not an isolated incident, right? Like this happens very much so between the government and Afro-Indigenous leadership, because there's a level
Hispanic,
of like,
I'm Honduran. There's like, first of all, they probably don't even know what that is. They're like, what? Where is that? They don't know where it is. They don't know what it is. And I'm like, it's right on the Mexico. Like, it's right there. It's really small, but you know. And they're like, oh, you're not Spanish. Say something in Spanish. And I'm like, no, like, because I'm not.
right.
Because like I'm not a parrot. One, I'm a human being, and I don't have to like prove myself to you. When you grow up in New York City, we don't have that problem.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is Hispanic. Everyone speaks Spanish. Even the people who aren't Latino, Latina, come from a Hispanic background speak Spanish because their best friend or their aunt or the person that they went to school with or their teacher, you know, speaks Spanish. So when I went down south to college, and I realized like, wow, people really don't. They really think I'm lying. Like they really think I'm just trying to be somebody that I'm not. Made me want to learn more about, you know, my heritage, and made me want to be around my family more. That's why I wanted to have you on, Janel, so that way we can like, you know, continue on with these type of conversations or answer any questions, or other people can share their experiences as well.
I grew up thinking of races in a very like through the American lens, which here everyone, if you have one drop of Black blood, you're considered to be Black, right? And those are just the rules that were pretty much thrust upon us just because we're here, right? And I know that it's not like that everywhere, like, because race is often determined by whoever the dominant group is, right? So like, for instance, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but in like Puerto Rico, if there was a time when after slavery slavery was abolished, that white people started to count in lighter Black people in Puerto Rico as white so that they could increase their numbers and maintain power. And so whiteness really didn't necessarily mean that you didn't have any Black ancestry or any African ancestry. It just, they did it based on your actual complexion. So your mother could actually be a different race than you. Like, so like that was a thing in Puerto Rico. I don't know if that's been like that other places. But the reason I mention it is because I used to think that when people, I guess, separated themselves from the word Black, that it was always rooted in like anti-Blackness and not wanting to be associated with like the American Black, because that's considered to be such a, a negative thing around the world. And then I kind of learned from just like reading from people from around the world that it may not always be the case. Like in some places, like in Nigeria, for instance, they don't call each other Black, like they call each other Igbo or Yoruba or, whatever their actual ethnicity is. And Black is a very, very American way of describing someone of African descent. So I guess my question is,
I'm Alice.
Hi, Alice.
I'm a Ghanaian. I just decided to hop into this conversation to learn, and I hear you talking a lot about Nigerians being African and all of those things. And for me, usually I tell people I became Black when I came to America, that I was never Black. That was never a part of my identity, because in Ghana, almost everybody is Black. Yes, we're colonized, and that manifests in a lot of ways in the country, that Africa has like $1 trillion bleaching industry. So that's how it manifests in there. But also to be I think to be defined as African American is really complex because Africa has over 50 countries. So if you say I'm African American, for me, I'm like, I cannot be from all these 50 countries. That I know I'm from one specific country. And I think that also gets complex for other African Americans in this country who maybe not know their roots. That also, like, there is a whole conflict between African Americans and African immigrants in this country, and people talk about that a lot. But it becomes difficult to be, for me, to, let's say you're a 30-year-old woman and now you're an American, all of a sudden you're being called Black, and you're like, what do you mean I'm Black? It doesn't mean that I'm rejection or I'm saying I'm not Black. Of course, I know my skin color is Black, but then why should that define me when, of course, I come from a country where Black is celebrated every day. My president is Black. Almost everybody in the country is Black. My teachers were Black. Everybody that I went to school is Black. So why should that be a defining factor for my life, or why should that even matter, if anything? Like, in Ghana census, there is no way to say, are you Black, are you this? Nobody cares, all those kind of things. But in America, I think that's so important, and also that's how things are run. So all of a sudden you are dumped into this thing with so many different ways to define you, like so many different ways to get resources, that sometimes you really want to move away from that to say, this is not who I am. Well, you're trying to put me into this box, but I'm not African American. Or I know some Africans will say I'm Egyptian American, I'm Nigerian American, I'm Ghanaian American, this kind. Also to say that Black is not monolith. Like, there are so many of us, like there are so many differences among Blacks, that some of us are from the Caribbean, some of us are from Africa, even that there are so many of us, different differences. So I think for me, I always say I'm still learning. But I tell people I'm Black, but I'm not African American. I would tell people I'm Ghanaian American. And when I say I'm not African American, that's not a rejection of being Black, because I celebrate my Blackness every day in the food that I eat, in the way I dress, in the way I talk. I know when people see me, they know that I'm Black, and I'm not rejecting that, but I'm just saying I'm not African American, I'm Ghanaian American, because for me, I know I cannot be from all 50 countries in Africa. So that's just something little that I want to add.
Thank you for sharing that. I never even thought of it that way before. That was a great way to basically break it down, because you really can't be from all different places. And if you are from
people
a
ask
specific
me
place,
that if I'm Hispanic or if I'm Latina, and I'm like, yeah, I'm from Honduras. It's like, oh wow, you are? I thought you were Puerto Rican, or I thought you were Dominican. Because the most of the Honduran people I know, they're darker than you. And I take offense to that, because my whole family pretty much is darker than me. My cousin Bexira, and I take a lot of offense to that sometimes, because they feel just because of my skin tone that I have to be Puerto Rican, or I need to be Dominican, or I need to be from another country other than where I'm from. And then I also have a little bit of it in our own culture, because when we go to the parks in the Bronx, like Ferry Point and those places, there's one side of the park where my mom and Big Saida and all of us are at having a good time. And then there's the other side of the park where it's my father's side of it, where are the whiter Hondurans at. But I don't identify with that side. I don't go over there because that's just not me. So, there's a lot of things that happen even just amongst myself, and trying to explain to people, again, where I'm from, where the country is. It becomes a social studies lesson because they don't know. And, as an entrepreneur and as a businesswoman, I also see in different Latina groups on Facebook, there's not a lot of people that look like my cousin Bexira, that look like my mom, that are in these groups. And again, I talk to my other Latina friends and say, what can we do to let people know that we are out there, and we have a presence, and we have a huge buying power, and we're out here in the mix of it all. So we kind of just end up, I don't know where,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, I appreciate all of you for sharing that very real perspectives. I think for the point that you just made, even within our community, and I can only, of course, speak for like the Garifuna community. So my mom, I'll use her as an example. My mom is like a few shades lighter than me. I think she might be like your complexion, I would say. And people have asked her like, "Are you Garifuna?" Like, you know, like because of that, their